back again here with a special guest, one of the hardest working, highest motor players, people I've ever had the privilege to being around. Was a 4-year player for both lacrosse and hockey at Norwich University. Has gone on and to be a professional lacrosse player, 2-year captain for us at Norwich, and again all around leader, exemplary student, citizen, and somebody I'm really proud to call a friend. So, Callum Jones, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. It's been a little bit since we chatted too, so should be a good one.
Absolutely. Callum, we usually start if you could just give like a quick, you know, overview of where you're at now, maybe where our paths crossed, but really where you're at now, and then we can maybe work backwards.
Yeah, so right now living in Aurora, Ontario. I live on St. Andrew's College campus, which is a high school. I'm working at a GM dealership currently as a finance manager. I like to say that's my part-time job, but that's one that pays the bills. I like to say I'm a full-time lacrosse player, but not quite yet. And then I also play for the Ottawa Black Bears. Previously, the New York Riptide. We moved to Ottawa and partnered with the Ottawa Senators. So we had our first season in Ottawa. A little bit of a disappointing end of the season, but tons of growth. There were tons of positives to take from it.
Great. So starting at the beginning for me, 6 years ago, probably, you're playing for Oakville for one of my former teammates. You're a forward, and he comes to you and says, basically, you guys are going trying to make a run for the championship, and says something to the effect of, "You can't play forward for me anymore. We either got to trade you or you're going to become a D." Would that be fairly accurate, or?
It was pretty accurate. So he came to a lacrosse game in the summer because we usually got a pretty good following in Burlington for lacrosse. And Mike Tarantino saw me play a lacrosse game as strictly a defender, and we were making a push, kind of this was the year to try to do it and win it all. And he kind of was either like, you're going to be maybe your 13 forward in and out, or let's try you on defense. I think you'd be really good at it. So I said, screw it, let's try it. And then ended up working out pretty well.
Yeah, I don't know if people would realize like how big of a transition to play one position your whole life. And obviously, again, you have the defensive mindset in lacrosse, but to do that and thinking about pivoting and defending at the hockey sphere, what do you think was your biggest challenge just early on?
Early on was skating backwards with the puck. That was just felt awkward, just kind of not knowing what was behind me. Um, it honestly was all weird. I remember going to training camp, and I remember the first skate. I was like, "What are we doing here, man? This doesn't make any sense at all." And then kind of slowly stuck with it and stuck to the process. And like I said, it worked out really well. He actually did it. It was pretty funny. So the year previous, he did it with another defenseman, Garrett Pike. So we were D partners. So played forward all the way up, and now D partners on the back end. And he had a little bit better of a hockey career than me. He's currently playing in the AHL, but very cool how we were kind of the two top D pairing, both forwards converted to D. I think that's Tino's claim to fame.
Obviously, I think above and beyond the general athletic ability, you guys went on a pretty good run, and then Tino and I were talking, and you were talking to some Division One teams, and it gets close. And for us at that time, we were recruiting, and we needed one more D. And Callum's the last school I remember that was like pretty serious might have been Maine.
Yeah, Maine was waiting for a grad transfer to get back to them.
Yeah, and I remember pretty vividly our conversations. I can remember Tino sending me a pretty long dialogue of a text of what you were as a person, a leader, a captain. I think for me on a recruiting side, it was one of the better. I guess it's easy to say after the fact, but I think I like to say I did that with everybody. But maybe you could just tell that recruiting story because it led to do a lot of great things, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, I mean, I had a decent amount of D3 interest to go play D3, and I had some pretty good D1 lacrosse schools looking at me, but I knew I wanted to really try to pursue hockey for as long as I could. And then a lot of these D3 schools, they were calling me saying I was going to run the power play, I was going to be top offensive minutes, and to me, I was kind of just like that. Either you haven't come and see me, or you're just kind of telling lies. And then I remember talking to Cam, and I asked him, where do you see me in the lineup? It was always one question I asked every coach, and Cam said to me, We have 10 defensemen. All 10 are going to get an even choice. I'm playing the top 6 defensemen every night. And from that conversation, I knew Norwich was the spot for me. I didn't want anything given to me. I wanted to earn everything. And I think all 4 years there was every night. Our best roster played every night. And I think that's why we were so good for so long.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Because what sticks with people, but Callum, it's amazing how many people you tell that to, that for right or wrong, right? They want a little bit more of a carrot. They want more guarantee. They want, hey, I'm going this. And I think people have to realize that we're at the point in recruiting season where you're not making visits on campus.
Yeah.
You had a couple of non-negotiables, right? Was had to have hockey, had to have some version of lacrosse. You wanted to keep lacrosse involved, knowing that would be the path professionally. And so the first time you ended up seeing the campus was when like you got dropped,
Dad dropped me off.
which is like kind of crazy, but that's how things went. And then from an early time, those people that are maybe watching Callum play pro on TSN or ESPN Plus in the States, and watching you be a pro lacrosse player, you're a pretty intense individual, right? Like you're in your face. You've got a motor. I think you've kind of made a name for yourself back there at that level, even in your younger time. And I can say that you did the exact same as a hockey player. Where do you think that comes from?
Honestly, I think it was my dad. And kind of the way I grew up was always earn everything. And then even being younger, playing sports, school, whatever it was, I don't care if you're the smartest kid in the classroom. I don't care if you're the most skilled. I don't care about points. I just care about how much work you put into everything. He would rather me study for 3 days straight for a test and get a C plus than cheat off something to get an A. It was instilled in me at a very young age that work ethic means everything. It trumps everything.
Yeah. So Callum, just something like if you're talking to like younger Callum Jones, someone who is listening to this podcast that wants to maybe be like a single sport or a dual sport athlete, in college, regardless of the sports. And of course, the two sports we're talking about is hockey and lacrosse. But what advice? I mean, I understand the work ethic piece and the hard work piece, and you have that. That's one aspect of it. But if you were to sort of hit stop, hit rewind, and kind of do it all over again, and you're a 13, 14, 15-year-old, what advice would you give either to your younger self, or what advice would you give to somebody out there who's trying to balance doing well in school, doing well in sports, managing a social life, and then all the demands that come with living in 2025 and beyond?
The biggest thing is something has to give. If you want to do everything, you kind of have to prioritize what's important to you. For me, that was missing a lot of family events, missing a lot of birthday parties, not having as much of a social life, but there was still a little bit of that, but it was mostly just I loved playing lacrosse. I loved playing hockey. So that was kind of my social aspect of things, but it's impossible to do everything. If you do everything, you're going to spread yourself too thin, and it's just not going to work out for anyone.
Do you feel like that, by the time you got to Norwich, that you had it figured out and how to do well in school, how to do well in hockey, knowing that the lacrosse season started before the hockey season
I
finished?
think my time management was pretty good. I don't think I had it figured out. I think I was always learning kind of what to prioritize. I was very clear going into Norwich that hockey was going to come first, no matter what. Not over academics, just more sport to sport, that if there was a conflict, hockey was going to come first.
Right.
But there was still a learning curve. I mean, it was different writing papers. I mean, at the college level, it's just different kind of. Took Spanish my first 2 semesters. Like that was the biggest struggle probably in my 4 years at Norwich. So I had to find time to really hone in on that and make sure that I could stay eligible to play sports at Norwich.
Do you feel like, Callum, like your final 2 years as the captain, part of the leadership group, do you feel like, by then you got school sort of figured out, you got hockey sort of figured out, lacrosse sort of figured out, there's sort of a battle rhythm going on there. But do you feel like once you took on that additional responsibility of now you're responsible for anywhere between 28 to 32, 33 folks, you got to communicate with the coaches, you got to communicate. Do you feel like that you were ready for that challenge at that point? Or looking back, do you feel like, wow, I wish I had an opportunity to kind of like, spend some time, whatever, studying leadership, working with additional coaches, or having a mentor that's out there in the wild?
Yeah, I think I was definitely ready for the challenge. I definitely had kind of my studying habits, my workouts, kind of preparing for hockey all figured out. Even my social life, I was still able to have fun and enjoy, be a college student. But being a captain at Norwich definitely held a lot more of a burden than anticipated. Basically, all the ducks would fall into a row, and when you asked people to do things, it didn't work that way. You really kind of had to find different ways to connect with different athletes. And that was kind of one of the biggest things that I learned at Norwich. An iron fist isn't the only way to lead.
I look back at your time and I just remember just the unbelievable work ethic, and just how I would categorize it is even if you didn't have the right words to say, you led by example. And I think that even though you weren't necessarily like incredibly vocal, I felt like your actions spoke volumes. And I think that there's something to be said for that. There's also something to be said for like listening before you speak, and all that sort of stuff. And the last question I had before I hand it back over to Cam, would you say that as you're into the professional world, that those attributes that you embrace and those values of integrity, of work ethic, of you just pursuing excellence, have those translated into the professional world? Or do you feel like those were just like that was college and I just kept that at the college level?
No, definitely. They're pretty linear with coming to the professional league. Work ethic, desire to win, leadership has all kind of followed me to professional sports. It's changed a little bit in leadership because there is a business side of things, but I think it definitely, I think I'm the same person and kind of continuing to evolve a little bit even more with my leadership as a person and a human, but definitely the same. Definitely.
Yeah, Callum, I was hoping to talk a little bit just about your growth and how proud, I am and Colonel Smith is. And I think the impact you had on the people was larger because of your growth. Iron Fist might be a little bit strong, but that intensity that you had a standard for yourself and really probably for others. If that maybe wasn't fair, if that was you just run at a speed that's pretty elite. Where do you think, if you can pinpoint, not that it's the aha moment, but it's how do you think over that time? Because I can remember going for walks around campus and talking about things. And number one, you have to want to get better. You have to want to connect with those people, right? It would be really easy. It'd be really easy to say, well, they just don't get me, or they just don't deserve my leadership, or whatever that is. Where do you think that started to like where you started to see things where you were able to like relate, have the empathy, sympathy, have different things for other people that where you're able to like have impact those people that weren't you.
Yeah, I think just having like conversations about the idea of leadership helped me a lot, especially when Sean Leahy came down and kind of gave his spiel on leadership and how important that was. And I still kind of have the Leahy commandments on my laptop and how he operated. And he spoke so highly on the empathy and love side of leadership. And I think that's kind of when the idea popped in my head where this guy's onto something. Like, if it's working for him, there has to be a component that's going to work for a captain of a hockey team or just in your everyday life. And then I think that was the moment where I started to realize that you need to be able to develop different styles of leadership for different athletes, and also kind of taking some psychology courses at my time at Norwich and the complexity of the brain and how everyone works. It really helped me with just different paths and avenues to deal with different situations and different styles of humans.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, or maybe go look it up, Sean Leahy was a hockey player. I was privileged enough to play junior hockey with him, and he went to Stevens Point, joined the Marine Corps, and was a Marine. He got out, went back in, and unfortunately is no longer with us, but was somebody that I reconnected with, was a captain when I was playing junior, and reconnected and brought him out to meet the guys, and very impactful talking about, we're talking about a big man, right? Like a really big, strong man that was talking about emotions and love and care. And I would share a story of even before maybe those things were really honed. I remember his brother played junior hockey in the same town. We played in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. And we were up in college and came back. They were in like the national finals, and it was a year or two after we were in college, so maybe our sophomore year. And we were having lunch, and he was telling me how he figured out some type of a power structure that he was trying to communicate with somebody. And he noticed that he was talking to someone. It was in a hotel, and he was basically standing, and they were sitting on the bed. and he could feel that no connection, and he sat down, and just the change in eye level, the change in power structure, that was something that he was able to make a breakthrough and traced it back to that. Again, thinking one of the things that I think Colonel Smith and I talk a lot about, and I think where you, Callum, took some major jumps, is celebrating people while they're here and or in the moment, or let's not wait to write a great obituary. Let's do that. And two things that, again, maybe just quickly, but I would say number one, my wife is a hockey wife, and Colonel Smith's wife was a little bit of a hockey wife this year. So, but at the Division III level, it's all hands on deck. And so we're talking, she would sew the names on the back of the jerseys. She would help us cook meals. At the end of all of that, there's lots of people that have said thank you. Callum brought a bottle of wine over to say thank you to her at the end of his time, like just recognizing that there was other people that were like there working for you, working and wanting what was best for you. We were really touched just of the thought. So I wanted to publicly kind of say that. From a teammate perspective, Callum was nominated and was given the honor of being an all-league defenseman. And again, just to try to give people the context, that is usually reserved for people that score a lot of goals. And it's voted on by coaches. And in general, we're so busy in our own lives, it's really hard to navigate what everybody else is doing. So when somebody with Callum's pedigree is honored by those other coaches, that means he had an impact on them, of how hard he was to play against, of what the engine that ran our team, our thing. And Callum wins the award, and I come to find out that he calls his freshman D partner to thank him, to acknowledge him, to let him know how important that he was in Callum's success. Tibbs, there's Devin Thibodeau, who now was a captain this year. But if you could just maybe talk about that thought process, Callum. We're trying to spread this leadership, these little things, and naturally you've impacted some people. And again, that took you, I don't know, $5 to go down and buy a bottle of wine. It took you 5 minutes to make that phone call. But the impact is what is important, and the feeling that you left with people. So if you could maybe just speak to that.
Yeah. I know growing up, my dad, he would always try to do stuff like that. He was a correctional officer, just recently retired. So 40 years in corrections, super excited for him to be finally retired. But I always remember around Christmas time, he would go and get Tim Hortons gift cards and hand them out to custodians, just other people in the jail that maybe didn't get acknowledged as much for what they do in the jail. And I just think it's, once again, it's something, a way I've been brought up, that your success isn't only because of you, it's everything around you. If it was strictly you, then you're probably playing an individual sport. And even then, that's probably still not true, because you got trainers, you got so many other people trying to help you out and that are helping you out. So I know for me personally, when I was a freshman at Norwich, I got scratched the first 2 games, and Matt Burchill came up to me and literally probably 15 words just said, "Keep doing what you're doing great." And just like that little conversation just gave me such a relief that, like, I don't need to grip the stick too hard. I just need to continue to be me. So I tried to attempt to do the same thing with Tibbs, to kind of have that short conversation to give him the confidence and courage, and that he is a massive impact in my success, and giving him the confidence for the rest of the game, the rest of the season, and his next 3 years at Norwich. And it's something Birchie did with me, and it meant a lot for me at that time. And I just think little gestures can go a long way for someone.
Yeah, Tibbs is a rock star. The entire leadership group this year was awesome. Just a great group of human beings, and great dudes. And Tibbs, aka Tiblet, was fantastic. Callum, you've had a lot of different coaches, right? Like, lacrosse, hockey, juniors, peewees, all that sort of stuff. Collegiate, you've had Cam Ellsworth as one of your coaches. You got a different coach now at the professional level. If you were talking to the coaches out there in the world, right, what advice would you give them? What kind of leadership style do you think resonates? And I say that because you used the example before, that not all things work on everybody, right? Like how you impact somebody and how you influence one person may be different than the other person. Their backgrounds, where they're from, what motivates them, what inspires them is different. But can you just talk a little bit to, if you're talking to the coaches out there and they're listening, and you are a professional athlete who has done a lot, what advice would you give to them?
I think for coaching, everyone wants to be coached. If you want to do well in a sport, everyone wants to be coached. And maybe for at a younger age, if the kids are just there because maybe mom and dad want them to be there, you need to make it fun for them to maybe want to be coached. And that kind of goes back to finding who you're coaching, what kind of play there is. I know for me, I like it blunt. I like the no sugar coating. Tell me what I need to do. Tell me what I did wrong. But not everyone's going to do that and work that way. I mean, if you do that to an athlete, they might just shut down and then you lose that connection. Um, and I think trust from player to coach is, I think, a massive, massive, massive point. If you don't trust your coach and what they're saying, it's going to be very hard to kind of tell a player what to do.
Just one quick follow-up, Callum. The communication piece, folks deliver the message different ways, right? You can look online, and there's multiple examples on social media, if you will, of the coach that gets in the player's face, screams at them, belittles them, and all that sort of stuff. Just, and also there's examples of coaches that are nurturing, that try to inspire in a different manner, and obviously you like it to be direct feedback. uh you know can you talk to, not necessarily for you, but just, I don't know how many folks are on a lacrosse team. I'm sorry for not knowing, but let's just say hypothetically 28 to 30 on a hockey team, probably something similar on a lacrosse team. What would you recommend to, like, say, a high school coach, wherever that is, or or even maybe a college coach? How would you say that they should approach, the situation? And I know that there's different situations. There's exceptionally winning teams, there's losing teams, and there's somewhere in the middle. But just, can you offer some insight there?
Yeah, I think the messaging across the board needs to be the exact same. I think to the larger group, the messaging needs to be very clear and precise. You can't beat around the bush of what you're trying to accomplish, then it's going to kind of get too muddy and players are going to get confused. And then you're kind of working backwards to try to coach the players when trying to explain your message. And then I think simplicity is a super important one too. Just keeping it simple with coaches and communicating to players in a simple way where once they understand it, then you can start to evolve. You can't build from the roof down. You got to lay that foundation early and start building with what you have on the field, court, ice, whatever it is, and that's when the coaching skills can kind of come in and figure out what you have and what's your strength, what your weaknesses, and work off of that.
Would you say that, like, regardless of the sport, that the athletes are the foundation of what it is that you're building and making that connection? Or would you say that there's another aspect to that foundation that is more important that you need to build to get to what your objective is?
I think maybe the athletes are the material, maybe not so much the foundation. Because if you have a bunch of athletes with no coach, then they're going to run mayhem most likely, and the team's not going to operate very well. So I do think it's a combined effort for the foundation between coaching, messaging, and your
Yeah,
athletes.
I like that. And then, just, I know we're only a half an hour into the podcast. I just like to get on record whether or not you have any desire to be a coach someday. If so, what sport would you pick?
Yeah, I'm actually doing some coaching recently. I work in Uxbridge, and it's a very small town with not too much of a rich culture for lacrosse. And so I started helping out with them a little bit. And then I've been helping out on St. Andrews College, doing some field lacrosse there. I think lacrosse is what I would like to coach. I think I have a much more advanced and extensive knowledge for the game, where I think I could able to communicate it a little bit more clear. Hockey, I think it would be awesome, but just what the kids can do with the puck and skate now, it's way above my head now. I don't think I could do it. Maybe 6 and under I could coach, teach them how to stand up and hold a stick.
Yeah. I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit.
I would just run cam systems.
Thanks, Callum.
Callum, one of the things I believed in as a coach was to really try to have a player-led team. So we did a lot of, like, probably unique things as far as rules and expectations. And I don't know if that maybe led to the heaviness that you felt earlier, just because, again, there is quite a bit of responsibility. How did you grow in that, like, in those roles where you were put in, for lack of a better term, you had to be forceful, you had to be caring, but you were really kind of driving a bus in a leadership role.
Yeah, I think I mean, I think you guys actually helped out with this one, but was spreading it more evenly across the leadership and not having one or two captains, which I was strongly against on record at the beginning. But I think that helped quite a bit down the stretch of things, just having more guys to lean on, to help to ask for advice. And then another one was just me opening up to other people and kind of if I was struggling or it was heavy on me, and Jess was a massive one for me. I was able to communicate with Jess all the time, and she probably has the best ears around. She'll listen to anyone and give the best advice, and she's there for anyone on any becking moments. Jess was massive for me during the stretch of I think my senior year was just me being able to ask for help, and when I needed it, it was always there.
So Callum, you talk about being adamantly against the extended leadership group, and we've kind of shared like my relationship with Colonel Smith, and really the last 2 years has been I think more intensive. And before that, it was more myself, but he'd be around a little bit. And I was trying to sell you on the idea, the best way to serve that team, not next year's team, not last year's team, but that team was to have a bigger group. And I remember your objection, and we had a lot of conversations. So what, just for clarity, what were you against? Do you remember your basic objections?
Not overly. I knew I was against it, and it wasn't because it was a power trip and I wanted to be the only guy wearing a letter beside Willie and someone else. I felt that there needed to be some sort of pyramid scheme of power, and it was traditionally hockey. It was either two C's and an A or some sort of variation of that, and it felt unnatural and unethical to have so many letters on so many goddamn jerseys.
So yes, I remember those conversations, right? It was just this, it was tradition. And we fought a lot of those traditions, right? It was, hey, you show up to the rink 2 hours before the game. Well, why? Because they always did it. Well, you have a pregame skate. Why? They always did it. So we would fight that. We would try to find, and when I kept getting better as a coach, it was like, all right, let's see what's going to be best for us. In those conversations we had, and it was very clear to me that we needed multiple people, just the way that the team was organized. And I remember I was sitting, and out of nowhere, you just go, let's call Colonel Smith. Like, I'm friendly with Matt at this point, and I could call him, but usually I would like text him, ask his availability. And I'm like, sure, we'll just call Colonel Smith. So I'm like, put you on hold. And I call him. I'm like, hey, are you free? And he's like, yeah. And all of a sudden we just drop it in, and you just go off and ask, hey, this is what I think. And Matt, I don't know how much you remember this, but you're just like, absolutely. And it's like flattening the organization. And I thought Callum was going to think like I prepped you. And I'm like, this is you, Callum. Like, no idea. But this is how a lot of these things started happening with even you and I, Matt. It was those conversations where we found that our lives were so different, but our values and the way we saw certain things, leadership being one of them, was very similar. And for the record, I'm talking probably 3 to 5 days of having these soft nudging conversations with Callum where he is just like, absolutely not. And then he says, call Colonel Smith. And after 20 minutes, he's like, that's what we're doing.
I think we did a video chat with you about it too, and I think Keegs was on it as well.
Yeah.
And kind of hearing Keegs' perspective about it as well, it was like,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like half bad idea.
Yeah. I just remember not having like any context. That wasn't relationship. I think back to that time, great relationship with Matt Burchill, great relationship with, with a lot of those guys, but just not necessarily in a hockey sense. And Callum, I think like my hockey skills are like the square root of zero, right? I can't even skate, right? So like I'm thinking about this thing like totally 180 out, right? I'm thinking about this from military, going down range and next man up type opportunity and communicating to different people, all the things you've just mentioned over the last hour, right? And so like Cam absolutely did not prep me. But I knew that you were pretty intense, Callum. So I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, this could go like totally sideways. I'm never going to be invited back to Kreitzberg. I'm going to be hanging out in Montpelier. I got my one Norwich sweatshirt that I'm going to wear for the rest of my life. I'm going to be out, because if Callum doesn't vouch for me, I'm never coming back. And then, And it wasn't even until after that, I had no idea. I'm like, man, I don't even know how that went. Like it's crickets. And I'm like, apparently that absolutely did not go the way anyone wanted it to go. And yep, that was a great relationship that I had with the Norwich men's hockey team. That was awesome.
Went good, and maybe if we look back, could it have been a little different? I think at the time it was the right thing, and it has continued to evolve. Right, we looked at it each year in its own vacuum, but at that time, I just remember the kind of the order of operations, and I remember how, like, again, you for the record, you said it here first, and you were just like you were really stuck to the tradition of things, and I just I just remember thinking, like, who am I? We're calling this Air Force colonel right now. Yeah, sure. Like, so it's been a wonderful relationship, but it was just kind of one of those funny moments that I just absolutely remember, like, moment for moment, etched in my brain, like, Callum, like, call Colonel Smith. I'm like, sure, like,
Which Callum, by the way, we reference that all the time because this year we had Clark Kerner, we had Johnny, again, two very different personalities, very different hockey players, and all that sort of stuff. So we had Tibbs, and we had just all sorts of different personalities. So it came up more than once. But also, I would be remiss if I didn't say that's the culture that you built there, Kim, right? Like the culture of openness, the culture of willing to accept input and all that sort of stuff. And then, and Callan, the level of maturity, they're like, hey, it's worth a try. And knowing that if it didn't work, we could also adjust fire to, like, oh my gosh, if there's too many cooks in the kitchen and it doesn't work, then we can also go back to the traditional approach. And I think that's kind of a special culture as well.
Yeah, it worked out great for us.
I want to make it pretty clear because we're talking about two things parallel. One is we're using words of caring, loving, emotion, asking for help, all of these things that are, probably a lot of people would associate with some form of weakness. And then we're also talking to one of the hardest, strongest that I've ever met in my life. Right. And that connection of being a strong leader through investment in the people around you, through asking for help, through that transparency. Yeah, I mean, was that what you expected? Was that what you thought? Maybe just and you've talked a little bit about how it's different in professional, and I know people are getting paid, but could you just talk a little bit about how that changes when you move up?
Yeah. I think moving up, there's still an aspect of understanding how everything works, but at the end of the day, if you don't perform, you're not going to be there anymore. So we're at college, if you're not performing, you still kind of have to pull them along and make sure that they're part of the team. Where at the next level, if you're not buying in, if you're not doing what you're told, you're a phone call away from no longer being with the team. So maybe it takes a little bit off my plate, but then you really got to focus on what's on your plate and make sure that everyone is pulling in the same direction and everyone is on the same page. That would be the big difference between college and pro. I mean, there are some guys that, I mean, possibly if it was a professional sport, they wouldn't be on the team anymore.
Callum, real quick, just maybe take a little bit of a sidestep here away from the leadership and just talk a little bit about personal resilience. Yeah. So I got a call from your former assistant coach, Nick Fisher, and he's like, have you talked to Callum? And I'm like, no, but what a weird question, right? In June. And he alerted me that there was basically a social media post put out that there's been an injury at a game. A player has gone to the hospital and game is called off and no one could get a hold of Callum. And we started reaching out. We started calling. Lo and behold, you are said person that is carted away. So if you could talk just a little bit about maybe that moment. And then I mean, obviously we stayed in touch a little bit through your rehab, but just, you said you've learned about yourself, what you put into that, and getting back to a professional athlete level.
Yeah, that was definitely the scariest injury that I've had. So what happened was, so there's the NLL, which is a professional league, and then there's the PLL, which is the professional field lacrosse league, and then there's Major Series Lacrosse, which is the professional summer league that guys play, and some guys from the PLL will play. But anyways, so I was playing that, and then maybe second or third shift of the game, just went to pick up a loose ball, a play I've done probably a million times, and a guy kind of got pushed into me, and the way it got pushed into me, my head kind of bared the load on the top, and I snapped my neck, and I remember falling to the side and my body kind of being like, okay, catch yourself, catch yourself, catch yourself. And then I couldn't feel anything neck down. And then I rolled to my back and then I'm screaming, like telling the ref, like, help, help, help. And from the neck down, I had no sensation. The trainers came on, they did a great job. I was super calm during the whole thing, which was kind of eerie, but it's probably one of the first lacrosse games my dad missed in probably 10 years. So it's just my mom and my sister. So I'm on the floor. We're waiting for paramedic and fire to come. I tell my coach to go grab my mom because I knew she was freaking out probably on the sideline. So I brought her onto the floor, told her everything was going to be okay. She went off. And then by the time fire got there, I was able to have some sensation in my feet, which was super relieving. Was able to wiggle my toes, had some sensation, still a distance feeling, but still no feeling from probably, I'd say, belly button up. They put me on a gurney, went to the local hospital, and by the time I got to the hospital, I could move all my extremities, had function of them, but I kind of had like a burning sensation, which was essentially just the nerves waking up again. They sent me in for CT and they came back negative, which was awesome. There was no break in the neck. They didn't see any abnormalities in the spine. So they sent me home, and then it was kind of a massive uphill battle from there. The nervous system, especially the spinal cord, is super unique because even the people that study it don't have full understanding of what's going on with it. So we didn't really know. Everyone I talked to was kind of a wait and see. There was no timeline. We didn't know if I was going to ever play lacrosse again. And then getting a hold of my team, my pro team, they wanted some extra imaging done to see if there was anything else going on in the spinal cord, which was great. So they helped me out with that, went for an MRI, and they found a mild bulge disc, which we assumed was going to be there. Something had to show up on imaging, but they also showed that I had bleeding in the spinal cord. So that was the major issue. And from that moment on, it was very unknown if I was going to be able to play lacrosse again. So I went to see a neurologist, and at that time, I was able to start working out, start training again, had strength. There was still some eerie sensations that kind of lingered with me, but the neurologist had some positive things. I had to go for follow-up imaging, and she said, if everything's clear, then we'll allow you to play. And she advised me that, like, I can't promise this won't happen again, but I couldn't promise if this wouldn't happen again to someone that didn't have this before. So I went back for my imaging, and my report came back that there was still something showing on my MRI. So at that point, essentially, from some people that helped me out, I was told I was done, that I wouldn't be playing lacrosse again, which was probably the lowest I've been. Like, it was super hard to hear. And then the next 48 hours, I went to see my neurologist for a follow-up and didn't really know what to expect, but kind of in the back of my head had the idea that I kind of had to figure out what life was going to be without sports. And she gave me the green light to get back and playing, which was like on top of the world feeling. And then leaving there, I got a job offer for my new job. I should have bought a lottery ticket that day because everything was going right. But that process of battling back was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. Just so many peaks, so many valleys, kind of the unknown. I didn't know if I was training for anything because I didn't know if I was playing again. Had no really clue what was going on in my body. Didn't feel great. Wasn't able to work at that time. Wasn't able to drive. So it wasn't a great experience. But looking back at it again and where I am today, I probably wouldn't change that experience because I like the person I am today because of it. I learned a lot about myself. Learned how important it is to have a support staff when things aren't going too good. But it was an eye-opening experience for sure.
How long did it take you to, at some point while you were getting kind of starting into the season, like how long and were there any hurdles mentally just to get back into it?
Like mentally getting back playing lacrosse? Honestly, there wasn't. I just think it's because I'm a little bit of a sick human being in the head.
The most loving way possible.
I just, like, once I got that green light, I was just so excited to get back kind of doing what I was going to do. And I literally first practice back, I went for contact immediately. So it's what I love. And if God doesn't want me to do it anymore, then so be it.
Callum, you mentioned your mom and your sister, and you've talked about your dad. Can you just talk about and you said the support structure, and of course the support structure, is your team at the time. The support structure is your family. The support structure is your professional team. But can you just talk a little bit about your family and just, what they mean to you?
Yeah, they're very instrumental in kind of who I am as a person and where I am. My sister's probably my biggest supporter. If I said I had a game in Nunavut at 12 o'clock tomorrow, she's probably booking the flight, the first flight out. She's amazing. She's supported me all the way through minor lacrosse to now, which I couldn't be any more thankful for. Same with my mom and dad. My mom and dad have really laid, I think, the foundation of who I am, of a person and athlete. They're just so thoughtful, so giving. They would do anything for anyone. Kind of once you're introduced to the family, you're kind of family for life. I know my billet brother, Jason Pinio, he lived with us probably for 2.5 months. And I feel like at family events, his dad's over at our place and it's kind of like, what's going on here? But just super giving. They care so much about people. And they love seeing me do well.
Callum, stepping into the professional game, I've seen some of those youth pictures of a young Callum playing lacrosse, playing hockey, whatnot. But what's it like being paid to play a sport that you love?
It's the best feeling, honestly. I think we don't get paid much to do it, but I'd probably do it for even less. Just it is so much fun being in these big ranks. Canadian Tire Center, like growing up watching the Leafs and the Sens in the playoffs, and watching Daniel Alfredsson, Danny Heatley, Chris Neal, and kind of being able to be on the same surface that they were. Playing in Buffalo, playing in front of 18,000 people. It's an incredible feeling, and then seeing people in the stands with your jersey. It's kind of, it makes you feel like everything you worked for was worth it, but it's pretty surreal.
I don't want to get out of here without talking about this, but we've kind of chopped you up to be a little bit of a ham and egger on the back end, right? And again, with pride, I think who you were, and that's what makes you good. But you scored a pretty big goal at Norwich. And I don't, I guess it's something that coming out of the COVID years, we finished the first year back. I think we finished fifth, and then we got back and we got upset we finished second that year, and we got upset in the semis and got in. I remember texting with you. Basically, it was like we needed like 7 games to go our way on a Saturday night, and we got, I think it was that 7, right? So we were like practicing, trying to like hope, fingers crossed, and all the games went Norwich way. So we ended up playing a national tournament game in Plattsburgh, and honestly, it was one of the better hockey. I mean, it's easy to say 'cause we came away victorious, but one of the better hockey games I've been a part of. Like, what a great hockey game, and everybody there. It was packed, but it ends up in overtime, and I can let you maybe take over from there.
Yeah, I mean, we played Plattsburgh a good handful of times, and I don't know, as a goalie too, there's just some rinks, some teams you just always feel good going into it. And I don't know, I think a bunch of guys just felt that way going into that game, and went on in overtime and was playing pretty well and went D to D. And for some reason, just thought I would go short side high and pop the bottle. First time ever, I think, in my life. But that game was so cool too, because my mom and dad were at that game. They didn't always get to too many games at Norwich, and the whole crew was there on that one. And it was a great crowd. And it was just like a good feeling. We needed so much to go right to be in that game.
Dog it, side by side. Puck comes out of Montero. It's a wrist shot, and Callum Jones wins it. The Cadets are moving on. A 2-1 win in overtime. The Cadets take it, and we'll see you in Endicott next Saturday.
And then we won that one, and we felt really good about playing against Endicott because we beat them earlier in the year. It was just so many emotions, so many positive emotions.
Hopefully we can find the picture, pretty iconic picture of you coming back towards the goalie. Again, and I would just say iconic in my world and in the Norwich world of you and Willie coming, I think, off the bench, and Drennan coming out to greet you. And like you said, obviously it was like first shift, we lost our leading scorer, broke his leg in the next one, and we were tied up. I thought we played pretty well in that game too, but didn't go our way. But a pretty big goal. As you continue to write your story and write your legacy, how do you evolve to be the next guy in Ottawa to do that from a leadership perspective?
Yeah, leadership perspective, I think for me, one is staying healthy and trying ways to lead if you're not in the lineup. So, don't know if Colonel Smith knows, but basically came back from my spinal injury, played 4 games, and then blew up my finger and was out again for another 8 weeks. So it was a roller coaster of emotions and kind of finding a way to lead. But leading on the sideline was a different experience because um, it's very hard. I found it very difficult to kind of tell guys what they're doing wrong, especially when it came down to simple tasks when you weren't able to do it yourself. Being a lead by example guy, I felt that extremely difficult. But I think um, in the future and how I continue to evolve is leading in those tough moments, whether that's me having a not so good game, but still finding a way to lead or lean on other people to kind of point them in the direction to lead, or if we're up in a stressful moment in a big game, finding a way to kind of keep guys calm and kind of be able to pull through in big moments.
That's great. Thank you. Boss man, I can see you're nipping at it.
I just wanted to mention that the legacy, we talk about this all the time, the legacy of excellence, right? I mean, Callum left that legacy of excellence and it became a point of departure for a lot of conversations. And it led to a lot of even better conversations just with, the current leadership group that's been there. So that's my only point.
Again, like you don't know how people's paths are going to cross, right? And so you want to try to create relationships. And so I basically got connected with Callum because of a relationship I had when I was 18 years old and stayed in touch and and then I got there, and then all of a sudden Callum, which I didn't know that up until today, of the impact that Matt Burchell had on
Yeah.
Callum early in his time.
Yeah, it's
And
epic.
we're talking about the impact Callum Jones had on Devin Thibodeau, or now,
Yeah.
what I mean? So it's this,
Yeah.
it keeps feeding itself by bringing good people and being yourself, but also investing in those around you.
And Cam, I just wanted to make note is, we talk about legacy, right? You can both have a positive legacy and a negative legacy. You can have a legacy of whatever, or you could have a legacy of excellence. Callum's legacy, it's a legacy of excellence. I mean, it truly is because of how he carried himself and his work ethic and his willingness to listen, to understand, and try to be that 1% better each and every day. And obviously it got him to where it got him. And obviously he's still improving too. So anyways, kudos to you, Callum.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we're huge fans of trying to watch. I would be the first to tell you that I don't really understand lacrosse that much. I'm watching as much as I can on the ESPN Plus, and getting to tell my kids that I know that guy, and I remember watching your first game, Callum, and my son was like super excited. I was super excited that we were able to find it. But again, everybody was excited for you and proud of you. I think we can talk about the goodness and how you grew, but also you pushed me to grow, right? You challenged me in a very professional, loving, caring, let's put the team as number one and make decisions. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be, right? I mean, we're here to get better, and no one's bigger than the team. And that wasn't me, that wasn't you. And we had a lot of really quality conversations where it wasn't just me speaking, right? We like to do these and hoist up those that we care about and give them a platform of the impact they made on others. But I'd be remiss to say that you don't, or that I'd be remiss to say that you didn't have an impact on me and made me better. So thank you.
Thank you.